Come with me down memory lane. Today we're talking about all the special features or characteristics we miss from older motorcycles. This isn't going to be a back in my day boomer rant from Facebook or anything like that, but I'm just going to pay some respect to the stuff that disappeared from motorcycles as they got faster, safer, and honestly a little bit more boring. The progress is clear. Modern bikes are incredible, but along the way, we lost some things that made riding feel, well, raw, personal, and alive. So today, I'm gonna break down those features that older bikes did a little bit better, the ones we'd happily bring back if the industry let us. And I think there's no better place to start than my personal favorite, analog gauges. There's nothing quite like watching the sweeping needle of an analog tachometer climb toward the red line. It just feels right, you know? It has a sense of drama and intrigue that a digital dash will just never convey. Analog gauges weren't simply functional, they were also deliberate. They were designed to match the personality and aesthetics of the bike that they lived on. Everything from the font, the instrumentation, the orientation of redline, they all told you something about the bike you were riding. That's one of the huge differences nowadays between analog gauges and a digital TFT. Older gauges were specifically crafted for a unique platform. They were designed to fit purposefully into the cockpit in a bespoke way. And yeah, they conveyed relevant information, but it also conveyed a feeling and a message. When the needle swung into the power band and the bike lurched forward beneath you, you felt a distinct cause and effect. Throttle up, needle up, bike goes forward, shift a gear, needle down. It's just nice, you know? TFT screens started life out as a premium feature. For a while, they were big, bright, full-color alternatives to the chintzy monochromatic LEDs that supplanted many analog clusters. They offered endless information and served as a key access point to manipulate many motorcycles' premium safety features. It was an upmarket thing that made bikes feel high-end. But now, they're everywhere. Not because they're necessarily superior, but because they're cheaper. Once the tech is developed, manufacturers can just copy and paste the same screen across an entire catalog of bikes, sometimes even using the same software on all of them. One dash, 20 machines with the same menus, graphics, and lack of personality. It's efficient, saving money for manufacturers while also providing a more premium look. But it makes many bikes feel homogeneous from the cockpit. Analog gauges feel timeless in a way that TFTs just can't. On certain bikes, a TFT makes total sense. There's just way too many menus and settings to navigate with an analog gauge. But it's sad to see them become the default even when they're not necessary or wanted. In my opinion, the best of both worlds is an analog gauge and a little digital readout as well. I think of stuff like my Daytona or the old R6 or even Porsche products nowadays that have a big needle in the middle and some screens. Bring back the needles, baby, come on! There's something deeply engaging about a cable-actuated throttle. It's simple, mechanical, and it's an honest connection between rider and machine. You twist the throttle, a little cable pulls the throttle bodies open, that's it. Nice little butterfly valve. No codes, no programming, no layer of digital translation, just smooth, linear, predictable connection between your throttle hand and the engine's combustion. It feels pure in a way that is becoming increasingly rare in modern motorcycling, although there are some bikes out there that still feature a cable throttle brand new. With a cable throttle, feedback is immediate and predictable. You don't have to add that extra layer of consideration when you open up the throttle and wonder, am I gonna get 5% or 10% throttle here? Small inputs have equal small changes to power delivery. Big inputs have big reactions. After spending time on a bike with a cable throttle, you develop an inherent trust that's kind of missing from electronic throttles. It's about direct causality, not digital negotiation of intent. But look, to be fair, I recognize fly-by-wire throttles exist for good reason. They're a core fixture of modern safety and performance tech. I mean, do you think we can get bikes this fast without electronic throttles? Traction control, wheelie control, lean sensitivity, ride modes, all of that good stuff that allows us to rip leader bikes as if they were on rails. And none of that would work without electronic throttles. Oh yeah, and cruise control. We do love cruise control, right? From an engineering and safety standpoint, fly-by-wire takes the cake, but not without all those aforementioned drawbacks. Something gets a little lost in the process. Electronic throttles feel a little disconnected. Sometimes they can even be hesitant with the choppy on-off feel at low speeds, and sometimes there's more noticeable dead spots and abrupt transitions. Looking at you, Yamaha R9. Fly-by-wire enables more control over fueling, and manufacturers unfortunately use that control to meet strict emissions and noise compliance requirements. It's a bit tough to do that with an actual cable that's opening the throttle, which a lot of times correlates to a less than ideal rider experience. Cable throttles mean more feel, more trust, more rider engagement. And while a lot of systems have added a lot of benefits, fly-by-wire often just misses the mark for purists who want an undiluted analog feel. And I count myself among those. My Daytona has a cable throttle, and every time I ride it, it's just an absolute treat. While often considered a rider cope too heavily leaned on by someone with a, well, let's be honest, a piece of crap hoopty, older bikes do have a degree of character that has been smoothed over in modern bikes. Older bikes never forgot that motorcycles are tools that are meant to be used hard, ridden often, and worn in over time. Older bikes came with more imperfections and only gained more personality as time went on. Exhausts were less restrictive, valves chattered in a way that would send a young rider today clamoring for a rear stand and a quart of oil. But that wasn't the sound of an oil-starved engine. It was just what older engines sounded like. I've actually seen this on forum posts, and I've had to tell people myself on our Discord, yeah, that just sounds normal. It's fine. Mechanical noises were present and unapologetic. I mean, my Daytona, before I started up and the oil reaches the top of the engine, it sounds like it's about to clatter itself to death. You could hear the engine working beneath you, not muted by ultra-refined engineering or choked up exhaust systems. Bikes communicated in ticks, whirs, and noticeable clunks when you changed gear. Little was sanitized or overly polished. The bike reminded you that it was just a real machine with all the violence and chaos that comes with having a bunch of controlled explosions inside of metallic mill. Modern motorcycles are better in almost every measurable way. I've said that a lot on this channel. But in polishing away the rough edges, that raw mechanical honesty just got lost. If you're making motorcycle content, you know how much of a pain it can be shooting and reshooting for different platforms. Widescreen for YouTube, verticals for shorts, every outlet necessitates different aspect ratios for optimum performance. But you're in luck because recutting footage for different formats has never been easier thanks to the 4K custom mode on the DJI Osmo Action 6. Here's how it works. You shoot just once. Later in post, you can crop that same clip into 16:9, 9:16, 4:3, or 1:1 without losing image quality. No reshoots, no swapping mounts mid-ride, no need to use multiple cameras for a single shot. One ride can be optimized for YouTube, shorts, reels, and everything else in between. Add in 4K 120 frames per second rock solid stabilization and built-in film tones, and the Action 6 turns into a legit content machine for solo creators. Making so many videos every week, we really need to stay efficient and keep our workflows optimized here at Yami Noob. The Action 6 alleviates a significant pain point for cross-posting content. If you're trying to make better motorcycle content while also making your workflow easier, the Osmo Action 6 is absolutely worth a look. Check it out by clicking the link in the description below. Everything looks kind of the same now, right? Cars, corporate logos, coffee shops, Airbnbs, and of course, motorcycles. We've flattened culture into something inoffensive and vaguely pleasant, optimized to appeal to the widest possible audience without upsetting or alienating anyone. I certainly don't do that on YouTube, right? Don't want to alienate any of my audience. And unfortunately, motorcycles haven't been immune to that trend. Sure, bikes are still distinct by category. A sport bike looks like a sport bike. An adventure bike looks like an adventure bike. And a naked bike still looks like a Bionicle your older brother ran over with his Mongoose BMX bike because you used his Bodman body spray without asking express permission. But within those categories, the differences are razor thin. Sport bikes all have the tiny stumpy tail section and winglets that look like cafeteria trays. ADV bikes have their beaks and hard panniers. Naked bikes have brutal and aggressive lines. Barring a few specific brands or models, it's often hard to identify what a bike even is when it flies past you on the highway unless it has its signature brand color. If it's orange and looks like a bug, it's a KTM. If it's green, it's probably a Kawasaki. You know what I'm saying? Everything follows the same patterns because everything's been optimized for homologation, efficiency, or broad appeal. But older motorcycles were seemingly more open to risk. They were strange, awkward, misguided, sometimes ugly, but certainly unique. You could spot something from across the parking lot and know exactly what it was that you were looking at. The first-gen Multistrada was ahead of its time, pioneering the tall rounder framework, but it was unmistakably one of Pierre Turblanche's most polarizing designs. Or even the first-gen Hayabusa was a freak of nature, and even though the Busa is still in production, it has nowhere near the same level of unbridled visual aura. Or the BMW Scarver, what the hell was even that? Translucent polycarbonate Game Boy Advance looking ass. These bikes didn't have to please everyone. They had a distinct style and point of view. It made them noticeable and memorable. Today, we just have less and less motorcycles that look wholly unlike anything else on the market. And yes, I sound like an unk yelling at the skies, old man yelling at both grass and clouds, but they don't make them like they used to, baby, come on. Older bikes were really simple, and that simplicity lends itself to serviceability. Yeah, look, rebuilding a carburetor isn't exactly most people's idea of a relaxing Sunday afternoon, but the thing is, you could do it with a handful of basic tools, a service manual, and enough patience to maintain a level head. Most older motorcycles could be maintained, fixed, or resurrected in a garage, a driveway, or a dimly lit apartment parking lot. Older bikes were designed with an ease of ownership as a feature and a selling point. Everything was mechanical, real, and tangible. If something broke, you could see how and why and proceed on a course of action. Fuel delivery was a simple network of hoses. No spark, plugs and coils are the likely culprit. There was no issue of proprietary software or dealer-required diagnostic tools. No digital gatekeeper stopping you from keeping your bike running entirely on your own. That's not always the case for modern motorcycles. More and more systems are locked behind electronics, sensors communicating with other sensors, communicating with other sensors, communicating with Chinese satellites orbiting the Earth, farming your data. God help if you try to fix something, trip some unknown safety system, and your bike goes into limp mode, requiring an expensive dealership visit. More complexity requires more expensive parts, more labor hours, more specialized tools, more knowledge base just to even fix or diagnose the damn thing. Every time modern motorcycles become better, they also unfortunately become harder to service and harder to own long term. They don't want to be understood and cared for in the same way that older bikes do. That's just a fact. You know what? Old bikes smell. Have you ever noticed that? They don't stink, but they smell. New bikes have that plasticky new car smell. Old bikes smell like a cocktail of fuel, oil, worn tires, and lots of fun memories. My 2007 Suzuki Hayabusa that I famously owned here on the channel had creaking plastics and a big dash with amber-colored lights, and you could almost smell the gas and cigarettes just emanating off of it. It had so much aura. There is nothing as transportative as the smell of a catless exhaust with a richly tuned carbureted engine. Fuel efficiency, emissions compliance, never heard of it. Let's just dump more fuel into the engine for the sake of throttle response and top-end power. The faint sweetness of exhaust fumes hanging in the air after a ride just hits different. Does a big whiff kill some brain cells? Probably, but so does staring into a glowing rectangle for 8 hours a day. Pick your poison, I guess. Old bikes, track bikes, they all carry the smell of being ridden hard. Hot tires with those little rubber boogers melted on the edges, cooked to their limit. I personally prefer my Supercourses cooked to a perfect medium rare. Seasoned with a medley of brake pad dust and weeping coolant. These smells do something to your brain beyond just hurting it with chemicals. The smell is anchored in a memory. Walk past an old bike and suddenly you're transported to a different time. Like Proust and his Madeleines, one whiff of a bike that has been ridden hard for decades will unlock an entire chapter of motorcycling that no longer exists. Older bikes didn't require much electricity. A battery, a regulator rectifier, an alternator, ignition, lights, and that was kind of it. And even then, electrical gremlins still managed to ruin plenty of weekends. I blame points-based ignition systems, but what do I know? But the key difference is that you could understand and make sense of the system. Electricity flowed from point A to point B, and if it didn't, you grabbed a multimeter and a wiring diagram and you got to work. Modern motorcycles have much more robust electrical systems, but they're also exponentially more complicated. Today's bikes are packed with sensors of every kind. IMUs tracking pitch, yaw, roll, and probably your internet search history. All this data being fed into control units that make decisions hundreds of times a second. And while this stuff is generally beneficial, complexity comes with a cost. There's more failure points, more fault codes, more systems that can disable your bike if you don't pay the subscription fee or miss an over-the-air software update. Modern bikes work extremely well. They're pretty well built and very reliable until they're not, and they don't. And at least when it comes to European brands, the culprits are usually the electronics. Modern motorcycles are safer, more reliable, more capable, and heck, maybe even more fun than everything that came before them. But in chasing perfection and efficiency, something intangible got left behind. Or maybe it's tangible. Older bikes were different. They were mechanical, raw, flawed, but special. And for all the riders who value the connection that comes from that as a result, the features listed in today's video will be truly missed. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I'll catch you in the next one.